everybody. This is Michelle again. I am the daughter of Margarita Noyes, and Margarita asked me to come here to tell you another story. So this story is like the Odyssey. It's a long story with lots of adventures. This is the story of Hercules. If you heard the video about introducing Greek mythology and the beginning of Greek, the creation myths, and introduction of the different gods, we mentioned Hercules in that class. And we mentioned that Hercules had 12 tasks, 12 jobs, 12 adventures, and we couldn't remember what this collection of adventures was called. So I went away and I looked online and found the story online and found that they're called the labors of Hercules, the 12 labors of Hercules. Now, I learned the story of Hercules when I was a child by listening to tapes while I did housework, as I mentioned in the video on the Odyssey. But I didn't learn the story of Hercules from Odds Bodkins, the bard, Odds Bodkins, who tells the story of the Odyssey. I learned the story of Hercules by listening to tapes of a storyteller named Jim Weiss. Margarita can probably give you a link to learn more about Jim Weiss. But he, like Odds Bodkins, is a storyteller. And I loved to listen to his stories when I was a child. Jim Weiss didn't have a guitar, but he did use the voices and make the sound effects, and was a very good storyteller. And he told the story of Hercules. So I'm going to tell you the story now. Hercules was the child who was conceived by Zeus and a mortal woman. So Zeus was Hercules' father, and a mortal woman was Hercules' mother. The woman was Queen well, it's spelled Alcmene. Alcmene. We'll go with that. Alcmene. And she was already married to some king. So, and Zeus was married to Hera. So Hercules really was an illegitimate child. But that's how it happened. And the baby was born, and Hera hated Hercules because Hercules was from one of Zeus's affairs. So she didn't want her husband to have an affair, and she hated the child that came from the affair. So when the baby was sleeping in his cradle, Hera sent two snakes, two serpents, to slither up to the baby and kill the baby. But Hercules, baby Hercules, was so strong, he grabbed the snakes in his two hands and squeezed them to death. And that was the first adventure Hercules had as a baby. Oh, one thing you should know. Hercules, the name Hercules, means gift from Hera. So that was really a disrespectful name for Alcmene to give her baby. And if Hera hadn't hated Hercules already, she sure hated him with that name, gift from Hera. So Hera realized that it wasn't going to be so easy to kill Hercules. So she decided to wait and bide her time. So Hercules grew up, and he was very strong, and he married a woman named Megara, or Meg, and they had 2 children together, and they were very happy. And that's when Hera struck. Hera sent a madness into Hercules. So Hercules lost his mind temporarily. And Hercules had one really fatal error, or one fatal flaw in his character. One problem with his personality was he had a bad temper. And when he would get angry, he would get violent. And since he was so strong, this was really a problem. So Hera sent this madness to him to send him out of his right mind, and then she provoked him and made him lose his temper. And he flew into a violent rage and killed his wife, Megara, and both of their children. And only after they were dead did Hera take away his rage and his madness, and Hercules came back into his right mind and saw what had happened. So he was horrified. He had lost his wife, who he loved, and his children, who he loved, and he had murder on his hands, blood on his hands. So he wanted to redeem himself some way. He knew he had done a terrible thing in the sight of the gods. So he traveled to the oracle at Delphi, who was mentioned in the video about introducing the gods in the creation of creation myths. We mentioned the oracle at Delphi. Now, the oracle was a woman who would sit over a crack in the earth at a place called Delphi, and up through the crack would come vapors and gases, and they would come up through this tripod structure that she would catch the gases in it. And a tripod is something that stands on 3 legs. So it would stand on 3 legs, the gases would come up, and she would collect the gases and breathe them in. And as she breathed them in, she would go into a trance, and then Apollo would speak through her. So she was a priestess of Apollo, and she would tell the future, and she would answer questions, and she would speak in riddles, and many important people would come to her with questions. The oracle at Delphi. So Hercules went to her and asked how he could wash away the guilt of these murders. And the oracle told him that he would have to serve a specific man for 12 years, and he would have to accomplish 10 labors for him, 10 quests, 10 missions for this man. And the man was Eurystheus, who was a king of Tyres. So Hercules went to this man and offered his services and told him what was going on. And that's how Hercules was set on his path to do the 12 labors of Hercules. Now, you may have noticed the oracle said that Hercules would have to do 10 missions for 12 years. But this collection of adventures is always called the 12 labors of Hercules. And you will see later in the story why that is the case. Now, there was one consolation for Hercules. The oracle did tell him that if he completed these 12 years and these 10 labors, he would no longer have guilt, and he would become immortal. He would become one of the gods, which is very rare. But that's what she told him. So he went to King Eurystheus of Tyre and met him. And this king was a very petty man. Petty means he did not have a large character. He did not have a good personality. He was not noble and gracious, but he was arrogant and cowardly and liked to make people have trouble. And he really wanted to make Hercules suffer and fail in his labors, because this king, Eurystheus, was jealous of Hercules. He was jealous because Eurystheus was not as strong as Hercules, and he wasn't as brave as Hercules. So Eurystheus never was a hero, and he wanted Hercules to fail in his labors. So Eurystheus made the labors as difficult as possible. So the first labor of Hercules was to kill the Nemean lion. The Nemean lion was a magical lion that had skin that could not be cut by anything, by knives or axes or arrows. So you couldn't shoot this lion with arrows. It was very difficult. No one had ever been able to kill this lion. So Hercules had to kill this lion. So he went to the lion and wrestled it. He grabbed it and he pinned it to the ground and he put it in a headlock in his bicep and strangled it to death. Then he thought, wow, this skin can't be cut with anything. Wouldn't that make great armor? But he couldn't skin the lion because he couldn't cut it. So he figured out that the lion's own claws would cut the lion's hide. So he used the lion's claws to cut it open and to skin the lion. And he turned that lion skin into a cloak, with the hood being the head of the lion and the mouth of the lion, and the paws of the lion tied around his shoulders, and the rest of the lion hanging down his back. And in most of the pictures of Hercules, the classical old pictures, he is wearing that lion skin. And you can tell that it's Hercules because he's wearing the Nemean lion skin. So he completed that first task. The second task that King Eurystheus gave to Hercules was to kill the Hydra. If you were listening to the other video, when we were talking, we mentioned the video about the creation myths. We mentioned the Hydra and some other dragons. So this is the story that involves the Hydra. The Hydra was a dragon that had 9 heads, and whenever you cut off one of those heads, 2 more heads would grow in its place. So really, you made your problem worse. And if that wasn't bad enough, the middle head was immortal and couldn't be killed at all. So this seemed like an impossible task that the King Eurystheus gave to Hercules, to kill this immortal Hydra. So Hercules went on to kill the Hydra, and he took with him his nephew, I believe. And they went and they found the Hydra, and they fought the Hydra, and they decided the way they were going to kill the heads was Hercules would dart in and cut off one of the heads, and then the nephew would rush up to the stump and take a torch and burn the stump before 2 more heads could grow. And then nothing could grow from that neck. So this worked pretty well. Oh, I forgot to tell you how they were able to do this with these 9 fire-breathing heads. Hercules wove together a very heavy net, like a fishing net, only with big boulders attached to the edges of it, and the ropes were very thick and very heavy. And they snuck up on the Hydra, and they threw this net over the Hydra, which pinned all the heads down. And as a head would get free and rise up, Hercules would cut it off, and they'd burn it. And luckily, the middle head, the immortal head, was the last one to come up. And when it came up, they cut it off, but it was still breathing fire all over the place and flapping around because it was immortal. And Hercules buried it and figured that was good enough. As close as you could get to killing it. So he dug a hole, put the head in there, covered it up, and buried it. And then he went back to King Eurystheus to tell him the job was done. Oh, also, he took all of his arrows. Hercules carried with him a club and a bow and arrows. And before leaving the body of the Hydra, he took his arrows and he dipped them in the blood of the Hydra, which was poisonous, venomous. So now Hercules had arrows that were poisoned from the blood of the Hydra. So he goes back to King Eurystheus and tells him what happened, and King Eurystheus decides that labor shouldn't count as one of the 10 because Hercules had help from his nephew. So Hercules has to do an extra labor. So that's where one of them comes. Later on, another labor, King Eurystheus decides it shouldn't count either. So that's why you end up with 12 labors, even though the oracle said he only had to do 10. So the third labor of Hercules was to capture or kill or whatever the hind of Cernia. The spelling of this word is Cerynea. Maybe Margarita can correct my pronunciation later. But this hind, a hind is a deer. It's just another word for a deer, and like a deer that you would hunt. But this deer had golden hooves and either gold or bronze antlers. And it was the special pet of Artemis, the goddess of the moon and the goddess of the hunt. So Eurystheus thought that if Hercules kills this deer, he will make an enemy of Artemis, and that would, Eurystheus would like that. So the first problem was to find the deer, and the second problem was to catch the deer, or catch up to the deer, because the deer was so fast. So Hercules tracked this deer all over the place. He didn't want to hurt the deer. He wanted to catch it alive. But he just wasn't fast enough to catch up to this deer. So finally, he shoots the deer in order to catch it, because he has to bring it back to King Eurystheus. And as the deer is dying in his arms, Artemis comes to him and is enraged. But Hercules explains what the situation is, and Artemis heals the deer and saves its life, and then agrees to let Hercules take it back to King Eurystheus as long as Hercules would return it to Artemis afterwards. So that is how Hercules is able to complete that task. The fourth labor of Hercules was to capture Erymanthean boar. I'm not sure whether the pronunciation is Erymanthean or Erymathian, but it was a boar, and a boar is a big pig, a big wild pig with tusks and a bad temper and very aggressive. And King Eurystheus decides he wants Hercules to bring it back alive, because that would be very challenging for Hercules. So Hercules finds it and grabs it and picks it up and ties it up and carries it back to Eurystheus, whatever his name is, the king. There's an adventure along the way. He chases it around and has trouble catching it, like the hind at first, but it gets stuck in some snow. And so that's how he's able to just freeze its feet together and pick it up and carry it back to the king. And once he gets back to the king, he lets it loose in the palace, and it goes rampaging around, smashing stuff up and terrorizing everyone. And after that, this king did not ask for anything to be brought back alive, more or less, because that was such a disaster for the palace. So after that, the king decides to build for himself a big pot, half buried in the ground, in which he can hide whenever he sees Hercules coming, just in case there's something dangerous with him. This king really is a coward. No courage at all. So the third task he gives to Hercules is for Hercules to clean the Augean stables. Now, King Augea, or maybe it's Augeans. Anyway, the king had more cattle than anyone else in all of Greece. Thousands and thousands of sheep, cows, goats, everything. And they all stayed in these enormous stables that had never been cleaned. So you can imagine how terribly dirty these stables were. So that's an unpleasant task, but it could eventually be done. And King Eurystheus figured that Hercules' strength wouldn't be any good, and that it would be very humiliating for him to have to clean all of this nasty stuff from the stable. And to make it more challenging, King Eurystheus said that the stable must be cleaned in only one day. So Hercules goes to the king, who owns the stables, and says, "Do you think I can clean your stables in one day?" And the king says, "No way, it's impossible." So Hercules says, "Well, if I can, will you bet that would you wager 10% of your cattle? And if I can do it, then you give me 10% of your cattle." And the king says, "Sure, I'll take that bet because it's impossible." So what Hercules does is he digs 2 big trenches from 2 nearby rivers, coming straight to the stables and then out the other side of the stables. And then he blocks the flow of the rivers so that the entire river of both of these 2 rivers is forced into the trenches and through the center of the stables, washing away everything that was in there. And then when it's all clean, Hercules unblocks the river and fills in the trenches and puts everything back to the way it was. And so he was able to do it, clean the Augean stables in one day. And he claimed his prize of 10% of the thousands and thousands of cattle, a very rich reward for his task. However, when he went back to King Eurystheus and told him what had happened, King Eurystheus said that this labor should not count as one of the 10 because Hercules was paid, supposedly. So he sure was a petty, low king. But that is why Hercules had to do another extra labor, making 12 in all. So the 6th labor was that Hercules had to scare off a pack of birds that were people-eating birds, birds that ate people, that were terrorizing a town called Stymphalia, something like that. They're called the Stymphalian birds. So Hercules couldn't get close to them, otherwise they'd all come upon him all at once and attack him. So what he decided to do was to create a noisemaker, something like a very large rattle. And he ran around the outside of the town, rattling this thing and making the birds all fly into the air, and then he shot them with his poison bow and arrows. I was just looking down at my notes because I think I forgot something. I did forget something that happened earlier on. I'll just put it in here. On the way to one of Hercules' labors, he stopped for directions at the home of one of his friends, who was a centaur. And a centaur is a person who has the upper body, the torso and head and shoulders of a man, but the lower body of a horse. So when this centaur's name was, I'm not sure what the centaur's name was, but he was Hercules' friend. And he welcomes, this was on the way to the Erymathean boar. And the centaur welcomes Hercules in and gives him food, and Hercules wants to drink some wine. But the centaur recommends that Hercules not drink the wine because it's owned by all the centaurs together as a group. So it doesn't belong to Hercules' friend. He can't really give it to him. But Hercules laughs at that idea and drinks it anyway. And then all of the centaurs come out from different places in the forest and object and say, hey, you can't do that. And they attack Hercules. And so Hercules gets into a battle with the centaurs, and he kills a bunch of them. And at one point, he's shooting them with these venomous arrows from the Hydra. And his friend, the centaur who's his friend, tries to pick up some of the arrows and ends up pricking himself and ends up dying also. So it was a tragedy all around. But that shows you how Hercules had a bad temper, was a little bit foolish. He wasn't very careful. He wasn't very respectful of other people's things. And so that gets him into trouble. And he often ends up hurting people because of getting angry and getting into fights. A lot of people die in the story of Hercules because Hercules fights them and then kills them. Anyway, moving on. The 7th labor of Hercules was to bring back the Cretan bull. Now, there is some discussion as to what exactly was special about the Cretan bull. Crete has a lot of stories with bulls in them, special bulls, but a bull is a male cow, an adult male cow. And cows were very special in Crete. There's lots of myths about cows in Crete. But I think that this bull that Hercules had to bring back was a, a particular bull that had a very special story. And this is the story of the Cretan bull. The king of Crete is named Minos. And Minos was praying to Poseidon, the god of the sea, and he promised that whatever Poseidon sent out of the sea, the first thing that Poseidon sent up onto the shores of Crete, Minos would sacrifice to Poseidon. And Poseidon sent a beautiful milk white bull walking out of the sea. And when Minos saw how beautiful this bull was, he could not bring himself to kill it and sacrifice it as he had promised. So Poseidon was very angry that Minos had not kept his promise. So Poseidon caused Minos' queen, his wife, to fall in love with the bull. And the wife created for herself a hollow girl cow, wooden cow that was hollow on the inside. And she got into that cow and was able to spend time with the bull. And she conceived a child with the head of a bull and the body of a man. And that was the Minotaur. And if you heard the tape about the or the video about the creation myths, we mentioned the Minotaur, and I did not know where the Minotaur came from at the time. One of the students asked where the Minotaur came from. This is where the Minotaur came from the Cretan bull and the queen of Crete. So this bull, the father of the Minotaur, the gift of Poseidon, was the animal that King Eurystheus wanted Hercules to go and find and bring back. So he does. He goes, he gets it, he brings it back. The interesting thing is where the bull came from, not so much the adventure that Hercules had stealing it from Crete. The 8th labor of Hercules was to steal and bring back the horses of Diomedes. And these horses are special because they ate people. And so they were very aggressive, and the King Diomedes, would take the horses into war, and they would trample people and attack them and bite them and eat them, and they were war horses. They were mares, female horses. So Hercules went and took them by force. He killed the stable hands. He got into a fight with King Diomedes and killed him and fed him to the horses. And then he took the horses back to King Eurystheus. The 8th labor of Hercules was to steal the belt of Hippolyta, or Hippolyte, whichever you want to pronounce it. Hippolyte was the queen of the Amazon warriors. Amazon, you know the Amazon. It's a river in South America. In Greece, they didn't know about the Amazon. The word Amazon means one breast, because the Amazon warriors were all women, and they were very fierce warriors, and their one breast would get in the way of their shooting their arrows, so they would cut it off so that they would become better warriors. And they only kept their daughters. They would throw away their sons, and they were a colony of women. And the leader, the queen, Hippolyte, she had a belt that she wore over her shoulder, which had been given to her by Ares, the god of war. And it made her the best warrior and unbeatable warrior. So it would be very difficult for Hercules to take this from her in a fight. So Hercules went to her, to the Amazon warriors, and he, instead of attacking, he asked Hippolyte if she would loan him the belt. And he was charming and good looking, and so she agreed to loan him the belt. And he was gonna just take it and leave, but Hera, who was angry that Hercules was accomplishing this task so easily without a fight, which he would probably lose, Hera went to the other warriors and the other Amazon warriors and told them that Hercules was going to kidnap their queen, Hippolyte. So the warriors attacked Hercules. And Hercules, I don't really understand why he did this, but he quickly killed Hippolyte and took the belt and left, just to make a quick getaway. I think he did fight the Amazon warriors, but maybe he killed Hippolyte so that she wouldn't fight and defeat him. He just killed her quickly, took the belt, fought the other Amazon warriors, and then he left. So he accomplished that task. The 10th labor of Hercules was to steal the cattle of Geron. Now, Geron was a monster. He had 3 heads and 3 sets of legs and 1 torso and 1 set of arms. And he had cows, like many people had cows. And these cows were guarded by a 2-headed ferocious dog that was related to the 3-headed dog Cerberus, who guards the underworld. So Geron's cattle were guarded by a 2-headed dog. Geron was the offspring, the child, the son of 2 other famous monsters. The father of Geron was named Chrysaor. And he is a monster that came out of the neck of Medusa when Medusa was killed by Perseus. And along with Pegasus, the winged horse, came out of Medusa's neck as well as Chrysaor. So Chrysaor was the father of Geron, and the mother was Callirrhoe, something. The spelling is Callirrhoe. If you can figure out how to pronounce it, message us and let me know. So she was the daughter of 2 of the Titans, who were the reigning deities before the gods. So Callirrhoe and Chrysaor had Geron, among many other monsters. In their family line are monsters. I'm not sure who else is in there, but their family is full of monsters. So Hercules had to steal the cows of Geron out from under the nose of the 2-headed dog. So, and the 2-headed dog and Cerberus, who guards the underworld, they are also in a family of monsters, which included the Nemean lion and the Sphinx. And yeah, so different monsters. Anyway, Hercules killed the dog first and was able to steal. He also got into a fight with Charon and killed him too. And he was able to steal the cattle. The problem was the cattle kept running all over the place, and he had trouble keeping them all together. So at one point, one of them got away and hid, or was taken by a person named Eryx. And Eryx was a tricksy guy. He was the one of the sons of Poseidon, and he stole one of the cows that Hercules was trying to take to Eurystheus, and Eryx hid the cow in his own cattle. So, and then he told Hercules he would only give it back if Hercules beat him in a wrestling match. That seemed pretty stupid to me. But Eryx could change shape because he was related to Poseidon of the sea. So he figured he could just get bigger or get smaller or turn into any animal and beat Hercules. But Hercules got him around the neck and held on and held on and held on no matter what shape Eryx turned into. And he always won. Hercules always won. He beat him in 3 wrestling matches. And when Eryx still wouldn't give back the cow, Hercules just killed him and took the cow. So he was able to bring, after some more misadventures, he was able to bring the cows to King Eurystheus. Hera sent a fly to go and bite the cows, and they scattered all over Europe before he made it back. And Hercules had to round them all up again. It was a pain, but he was able to do it. So he took them to King Eurystheus, and that was the end of that labor. The 9th, no, that was the 10th. So we're on to the 11th labor of Hercules, was to steal the golden apples of the Hesperides. Now, this was a very tricky thing, not only because the Hesperides were nymphs, and the garden was in a secret place that no one on earth knew where it was, but these golden apples had been a wedding gift from Hera to Zeus. So it would make Hera so mad for Hercules to steal them. And King Eurystheus knew this and was trying to get Hercules in trouble. So the first problem was to find the garden. And Hercules stopped and asked another son of Poseidon, who knew all the seas and all the islands, for directions. But the son of Poseidon wouldn't help him, wouldn't give him directions. What was the guy's name? Nereus. So Hercules tries to force him physically to tell him where the garden is. And Nereus is also a shapeshifter. So Nereus kept slipping away. And Hercules didn't want to kill him because then he couldn't get the information he needed. So at one point, Nereus turned into a fly to escape Hercules' grip. And that was a big mistake because Hercules caught him in his hands like this, so he couldn't change shape into something bigger. And then Hercules shook him up till he was really dizzy. It was a really dizzy fly. And he finally agreed if Hercules would stop shaking him to tell where the garden was. So now Hercules knew where the garden was, and he started his journey there, to the garden of the Hesperides. On the way, he passed the mountain where Prometheus was chained. Now, Prometheus was a titan who had defied Zeus and stolen fire from the gods. At one point, in time, mankind did not have fire. They were like the animals who did not know how to make fire. And only the gods had fire. But Prometheus took pity on men, and he stole fire from the hearth of the gods and took it down and gave it to men. And as a punishment for this, Zeus made Prometheus be chained to a mountain, and an eagle came every day and pecked out Prometheus's liver, ate his liver. And by the end of the day, the liver would grow back because Prometheus was an immortal titan. And the next day, the eagle would come back again. So Hercules saw Prometheus and took pity on him and killed the eagle. I don't know whether he set Prometheus free or not, but he certainly killed the eagle so Prometheus would not be in torture. In gratitude for this, Prometheus gave Hercules a very good piece of advice. He suggested that Hercules not try to take the apples himself, but that he go and find Atlas. Atlas is another titan who was commanded by Zeus to hold the entire earth on his shoulders. So you see pictures of a man with the earth on his shoulders. That's Atlas. And that's how the Greeks believed that the earth stayed in space and didn't fall or move. So Atlas was the father of the Hesperides, and he could probably get the golden apples himself for Hercules. And he would probably be willing to do that if Hercules would hold the earth in his place for a time, because Atlas was so tired of holding the earth. So Hercules went and did what Prometheus advised, and Atlas agreed to give the earth to Hercules for a while and go get the golden apples. Now, when Atlas returned with the golden apples, as promised, he offered to take the golden apples to King Eurystheus for Hercules. And Hercules realized he was in danger of Atlas running away and leaving Hercules to hold the whole earth forever. So Hercules did a very clever thing. He said to Atlas, "Oh, sure, I'll hold the earth. You can go. But just take the earth for a moment so I can put some padding on my shoulder so that the earth doesn't give me a blister." So Atlas was very cheerful and happy and took the earth back just for a moment. But as soon as Hercules had let go of the earth, he took the apples and ran away and escaped and brought them back to King Eurystheus. Of course, you can't hold on to the wedding gift between Hera and Zeus for long, so King Eurystheus had to give them back to the Hesperides. So the whole adventure was really came to almost nothing in the end. The final labor of Hercules was the most challenging. It was to capture and bring back the hound of hell, Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guarded the underworld. And in order to bring back this dog, you'd have to go to the underworld from which no mortal returned. So Hercules first went to some priests who were like necromancers. They knew the secrets of death. And he asked them to teach him the secrets of death first so that he would have some preparation. And they did. They taught him. And using their spells and advice, he was able to find the entrance while alive to the river Styx and cross over into the underworld. And he went and found Hades and asked him for the dog. Hades thought it was a pretty funny idea and said, sure, Hercules could take the dog if he could take him without any weapons, with only his strength. So Hercules did manage, after much struggle, to subdue Cerberus and take him back to King Eurystheus. King Eurystheus jumped straight into the urn, into the pot, and pulled the lid on over top of himself and told Hercules to take that dog right back where he found it. But he did manage to complete the task. So at the end of these 12 years, these 12 labors, Hercules was free from the tyrant King Eurystheus. He went on to have many more adventures. He fought on the side of the gods in a war against some giants who very possibly could have taken over Olympus without Hercules' help. He got into a fight with the oracle at Delphi, trying to steal her tripod because he didn't like the advice she gave him at one point, and he wanted to set up his own oracle. And that got him into a wrestling match with Apollo that Zeus himself had to break up. He had lots of adventures. But the story of the end of his mortal life is also very interesting. He married again a woman named Deianira. She was very beautiful and was a good wife, and he loved her. He married her, and he continued to have adventures. But Deianira was given a gift by a centaur of a balm, a magical ointment, a magical lotion that the centaur told her whoever put it on would love Deianira forever. So she wove a cloak for Hercules, and put on it this lotion, this balm. And when he came home one night, she gave it to him as a gift. And what she didn't know was that the centaur had been lying, that really the lotion was a poison. So when Hercules put on the cloak, he was burned by the poison, and it got all over him, and he couldn't get it off. He could take off the cloak, but it was too late. The lotion was all over him, and he was in torturous pain. So he went running in pain and agony out of the house, and he came to a place where someone had built a funeral pyre, which is like a big bonfire where you burn a body. And he threw himself onto this pyre, thinking death would be better than the agony he was in. And looking down from Olympus, Zeus saw this, and it was, of course, this is Zeus's son, Hercules. And so Zeus turned to Hera and said, Hera, hasn't Hercules suffered enough? Isn't it time to let him come up to Olympus and forgive him and get over your grudge? And Hera agreed that she would let it go and accept Hercules. So Zeus came down and rescued Hercules from the burning pyre and made him immortal. And now Hercules lived on Olympus as a god with his father and with the other gods. So that is the story of Hercules. So from the story of Hercules, in English we have a phrase, a Herculean effort, which means with great struggle. And it comes from the stories of Hercules, which were impossible to normal people, but with a Herculean effort, Hercules was able to accomplish them. Many of these monsters and little characters are referenced in English, in American culture, and in people such as C.S. Lewis. They've become part of the landscape of common knowledge, and people will refer to them. And if you refer to the Hydra, or to the labors of Hercules, or even the apples of the Hesperides, people will, this is the background that those references are coming from. So thank you for watching. I love telling these stories for you. If you have any questions or any ideas of other stories that you'd like to hear, any phrases or references that you have come across in your studies that you would like to hear the story behind that reference, send Margarita a message, and maybe I can come back and talk with you again.